Hello there, friends. Before we jump into it, if you like what we do here on cPDH.guide, the YouTube, and you want to support us in a free way, because, you know, that's what friends do, hit that like, hit that subscribe, even share the damn thing. All right, on to the show. Okay, we're gonna summon the genies. Summon the genies. Oh, no. This is a great intro. What's up, Pauper Commander fans? Competitive Pauper Commander fans. I was walking down the street and found this hobo. No, that's not the joke that I was going to lead with. The joke that I was going to lead with, let's see if we can pull it off. Newsroom noises. This just in. New allegations of slave labor being levied against PapaPauper for making combo players double sleeve his lands for his mid-range deck. News at 11. The timing is a little, whatever. It is what it is. So, normally, and I said this to him ahead of time, normally we go through this big deal and these things about, well, hello, player, tell me who you are, tell me where you're from, tell me how you got here, blah, blah, blah. However, if you have been living under a rock, then you probably wouldn't know. But the gentleman that I have before me, before us today, PapaPauper, thank you for joining us. And
it's a pleasure to be here.
Doing this damn thing. As you might have recalled a few months ago, he joined me as a co-host for an interview with Obstinate. Now the Mad Lad has taken the mantle himself and showed up big time for the Tournament Winner series. Ironically, I think I've captured every single tournament winner except for Philly. I don't think I've captured.
And you'll have more coming.
Yeah,
we got that common cause coming up here in April. Yeah, you best be signing up, folks. It's going to be hot.
Yeah,
it's going to be hot.
The best things are happening in the community, so sign up. So yeah, so foregoing some of the stuff, I guess we can touch on, and we should touch on. So if you don't know out there in internet land, TPI. Mid-range TPI took down Sanctuary, what was it, 4? Sanctuary 4?
That's correct.
Sanctuary 4, the mid-range deck. Yes, you heard it. Now, I got a little flack on Twitter because I put it was like the first mid-range thing, but apparently there was an Elias Elcor that took down a mid-range, took down a Philly event, a few, like, I might have marked that erroneously as control. Yeah.
That was for Riches to Rags, run by Dallas Peterson. That was an Ellis Ilcor mid-range deck. But again, Ellis Ilcor, mid-range control, those archetypes kind of pretty fluid. So,
Yeah, and in fact, part of the discussion that myself and Ryan and others in the community have been engaged in over the last few months is this concept of what mid-range and control are, and this blurry line between like reactive, proactive, how forward, how backward, all of that stuff. So that's a nice little segue into the deck construction. Now, I know that you had made some changes over the last couple of months, but not really so much in the last couple of weeks. So, so tell us a little bit about the changes that you opted into, kind of a way, disclaimer, I play TPI, I play a different...
Also, a third path iconoclast enjoyer, but of a different variety.
So
you're on the knack combo.
So my thought processes on how I'm applying pressure vary, somewhat greatly from what Ryan is trying to do with his list. So let's look at those choices and the more or less the cards themselves, but like the broad strokes of okay, I chose this type of thing to point me in this direction, kind of deal.
Absolutely. So Third Path Iconoclast, for those of you unfamiliar, I'm sure Clay could put it on the screen here for folks. blue and a red for a 2/1 human monk. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you're going to get a 1/1 colorless soldier creature artifact token. And there's a lot of things about this commander that really appeal to me. It's cheap cost, the fact that it's a human, the fact that it makes non-humans, the fact that it makes artifacts, the fact that it rewards you for casting anything that isn't a creature. That does include enchantments. It includes just about everything that isn't a creature. So it's incredibly broad. It's very efficient. It rewards you for basically just playing the game. If you think about like other commanders that are kind of known for being quite good, like Tatiova, it rewards you for playing the game by playing lands. Like you have priority to play lands. So you play lands and you draw cards. It's a really good mix. Abdel, what does it ask you to do? It just says flicker Abdel, basically. Play permanents and flicker Abdel. So your deck is very simple. It's like permanents that you want to see come in and out of the play, flicker spells to make that happen, and rocks to have enough mana to accomplish all this stuff, right? So Third Path Iconoclast is kind of in that same vein. It just says play like the best blue and red cards that aren't creatures. And incidentally, along the way, there's a lot of pingers. And these are cards like Reckless Fireweaver or Kessig Flame Breather, Firebrand Archer, Witty Roastmaster, Impact Tremors that reward you for either putting creatures into play, casting instants and sorceries, putting artifacts into play, or casting non-creature spells. So the idea here is that the only creatures you're playing basically are ones that do that, or ones that are of remarkable quality, such as Murmuring Mystic, which is second copy of your commander just sitting in the deck, or Filigree Familiar, which is basically like a Crackling Drake that just sort of, it's just into your 99, right? And so those are the only exceptions there. And so I think that like Third Path Iconoclast can be built a lot of different ways, and I think that that's important to note from the outset. The 1/1s can be used very aggressively. In my deck, I often find myself closing the game out with with like a bunch of 1/1s kind of like suiciding themselves into a person to convert a bunch of damage and then closing the game with burn spells. But the way we get there is going to be with pingers. Now, pingers are traditionally, I think, frequently seen in the role of combos, right? Malcolm combos in particular, where we're, changing our pinger over to a pirate, and then we're unlocking some sort of infinite combo that way. I'm using them as just pressure. And so the idea, the positioning of Third Path Iconoclast is that as a deck, we're actually what I would call a passive mid-range deck, to touch on that archetypical note there. And so like the language I've been using lately, proactive mid-range, dynamic mid-range, passive mid-range, although generally speaking, I find my decks kind of either being passive or proactive lately. And TPI is a passive mid-range deck because generally speaking, the purpose of the deck is to be applying pressure to everybody just by passively doing what we're doing. Like we're just casting spells, right? We're drawing cards, we're finding our land drops, we're playing out mana rocks, we're solving problems when they're sort of imminent to us. And then later on, our closing generally looks like a flurry of burn spells, maybe a bunch of attackers, but our 1/1s aren't attacking very often. And there are certain pods where if there's like not a lot of pressure coming at me, and maybe there's like a Gretchen player that just has like an untapper, I will just throw them in, like just get them into the red zone. But generally speaking, they're on blocking duty, or they're sacrifice fodder to other effects that generate me value. It could be drawing cards, like with Demand Answers, a new really amazing red card that we've gotten. It could be to cards like Heartfire, Improvised Club, Voltaic Surge, collateral damage that are going to use those for the purpose of generating card advantage or interacting with my opponent.
So before we get too far away from it, so honing on this passive, because once again, with all the conversation of the last 6 months,
like what makes it passive, right?
So some folks would say, okay, passive mid-range, isn't that control? And I wouldn't disagree with them. I just know that my mid-range decks and my control decks look different. I might be able to See,
Yeah,
now that I know I mean, because I know the makeup of your list, and granted, what I'm doing is I'm extrapolating a version of Control that's rooted in 60 card formats, but typically a Control list, and even if we look at Conrad, like Conrad is the big finisher of the Conrad, not to impose my own list, but like so the difference between I would wager that the difference between a passive mid-range deck and a Control list is probably the number of available threats.
Yeah, that could definitely be part of it. I would say that like even my mind is not fully made up on this. This is still an area of like deck building that I continue to grow on. And I think that the community is changing along at the same time, not because of me, but just because that's just how the meta is evolving. And as we get more players coming into the format, we're starting to refine the terminology, and other people are coming to their own conclusions. I use passive mid-range, and I think like when we're talking about mid-range and Control, I can tell you how it looks different in a black deck. In a black deck, it's almost entirely the number of creatures. So that's a big difference, right? A Control deck will tend to be like 15 to 20 creatures. Mid-range will generally be like 18 to 25. It's just a little bit more proactivity to it, essentially. And there are like, this is super, super general. And like TPI doesn't fit super cleanly into that because we only have 14 creatures in the deck. But like when I say passive mid-range, we have a lot of closing power in TPI. It is built into the deck. The 1/1s can be aggressive, right? They can be attacking for damage, but also I've made a very intentional choice to choose interaction that can also go to the face. And this is actually like something that I've like really evolved on with TPI as I've played it more. I would have these instances where I would have like 2 or even 3 pingers in play. And generally speaking, when you're playing TPI, you don't want to just like rush out 3 pingers. You want to sandbag them. Like if you rush out 3 pingers, you may find yourself dying an early death, right? And you just don't want to be dragging that much attention to yourself, even when you have it. Just because you have it doesn't mean you should use it. But I would find myself in a position of having like 2 pingers or 3 pingers and having like Bolt and Galvanic Blast or Improvised Club and Bolt or something like that. And just like burning people out from like big life totals as a win condition. And I think prior to that, I always saw the pingers as the win condition. Nowadays, I see that the interaction is also part of my closing plan. So cards like Massive Raid, which is 1 red and a red instant, deals damage equal to the number of creatures you control to any target at instant speed. This is a murder, right? It's a 3 mana, just like blow something out of the water for 10 damage. It's also somebody places Pestilence on the stack and they die on the stack, right? Like they go to wipe your board and you kill them on the stack instead. So it can be as a counterspell, but it's also it is a boom headshot. It's a finisher. And so as that started to percolate in my brain, we have new cards that entered the deck. Collateral Damage, 1 mana lightning bolt with the additional cost of sacrificing a creature. The sacrifice a creature thing is actually like an upside in a lot of ways in this deck. The thing that hoses this deck hard, that can hose it, is Echoing Truth. Echoing Truth can be very brutal. So somebody goes Echoing Truth, and as a cost, we sacrifice that target. We don't lose our board, even if they counter the spell. But Collateral Damage is also just 1 mana, deal 3 damage, and it's also going face. So sometimes Collateral Damage is a Thunderous Wrath. It's a 1 mana, deal 5. It's a 1 mana, deal 6. And you can start to see how cards like that really add up to like closing the game out. So Collateral Damage. Another one is the Heartfire and Improvised Club. Both of those 2 mana, deal 4, sacrifice an artifact or a creature. And then what came along after that, and this is all kind of like maybe a couple months ago, was Mob Justice. As I started to see this burn game
kind of develop,
coalescing. Yeah, which is cool because you and I are both like modern burn players, right? We both have our roots in burn. We're both longtime burn players. This deck is starting to feel like a burn deck to me. And so Mob Justice is 1 in a red, sorcery speed, deals 1 damage to target player for each creature you control. Now, it only hits players, it's sorcery speed, and it's 2 mana. So it's a lot worse in some ways, but it is only 2 mana. But this is another card that we've put in the deck because the ability to just take a problem player out of the game. Say there's somebody who's like big Voltron threat, lot of life. You chain together a bunch of cantrips into your pingers, and then you finish up with a Mob Justice, and you blow them out of the water.
And you said life.
Solved.
You said life that kind of triggered. There's non-incidental life gain that's happening like more frequently. Like people are leaning into like the Soul Sister strategies and stuff that. And
very common to see Selesnya just like having Soul Warden, Soul's Attendant, and Essence Warden, which are pretty frustrating cards when you're playing this deck.
Suture Priest.
I'll admit. Suture Priest as well. Yeah, absolutely. Or on the, and Suture Priest is an absolutely brutal answer to this deck. As well as Bloodseeker, Poison Belly Ogre, Trespasser's Curse.
Having the opportunity to take this big chunk out of a player, because nothing is more frustrating as a guy who also plays chip damage type decks. When you're like, okay, I just did 10 to the whole table. John over here just gained 6 life,
for every spell I cast, he gained 2 life, even through my pingers. And in fact, actually, this is what happened during one of my games. There was a Wilson Far Traveler player. This was a resident Hive Cryptid who played a really great game. And I had pretty much kind of like conceded that I was going to lose. There was a player in play who was happy with resident Hive Cryptid beating everybody down with Wilson because they had a Righteous Aura, which allows you to prevent damage from a single source, so it turns off combat or commander damage. He had a bunch of disenchants, right? So he kind of had like that problem solved. He couldn't handle me, but he had nothing proactive on board. And then there was a Conrad player who was this was Aggro Aaron, who was playing Conrad, and I was just in a terrible position. I was looking around for help, and there was no help. Right, there was nothing to like help me. And he was gaining a life for every spell I cast until I got another pinger out, and then that equalized it. So I wasn't putting any pressure on him, and it was really difficult to like close that game out. But it ended in a flurry of burn spells that took him from 27 to 0. Over the course of 2 turns.
Took them.
Yeah, it took Hive out. Yeah, exactly. And that was another moment where it just like clicked for me, like how important that strategy is. You can pack a lot of damage. Now, but the thing is that we're not really focused on that burn game plan until it's like time to close the game or until things become really desperate. Things were desperate there. He had an 11/11 Wilson with, first strike, vigilance, reach, a trample. It was a mess. And I was at 9 life. I was like basically going to take lethal. But yeah, I mean, that was a cool situation because it really demonstrated, I think, like the resilience of Third Path Iconoclast, right? That I was able to throw like 7 1/1s under the bus and eat as much commander damage as I needed to stay alive, and then buy myself another turn to dig through my deck for some sort of a haymaker. But the positioning of this deck is what I want to just hit on.
This is exactly where I wanted to go.
Okay, perfect.
So let's take a step back and like conceptually coming into this tournament, like your position or your thoughts on where it was going to sit archetypically, geez, it's been a long day. How it was going to be positioned in the proposed meta of this particular format. Number one, not that it's the biggest event that we've had to date, but I mean, it had what, 28 players. There you go.
Yeah, 28 players. It's very robust. I think, and those numbers just continue to go up, which is a really good sign. It's not so much the raw number itself that I'm thinking about, but it's more about like, did it grow, right? And so it did grow, which is cool. And so did the prize pool and everything else. It was great. So the positioning of TPI, broadly speaking, in the meta is that we are not there is very, very few instances where you will end the game before turn 6. in TPI. Okay, so what that kind of means is that at any given table, if we go by the stats, 30 to 40% of the meta is combo. And those players are looking to end the game as soon as they possibly can. And so when 1 to 2 of them, which is statistically likely, 1 to 2 combo players are at the table, and we're playing TPI, I'm positioning myself with this particular build to have incredibly efficient interaction to not die to them during their combo turns, while developing and generating advantage both through my board resources, also my cards in hand, and through pingers. And it's kind of a boiling frog situation, if you think about it that way. I am not the immediate problem at a table where there's a Gretchen and an Abdel. And I think that the way that we can prove that is that if you have that situation, there's a TPI and they're developing, maybe they have a single pinger, they're cantripping, they're pinging everybody. If you're not the combo player, for one thing, you are very, very unlikely to allocate your premium removal, of which you probably have 1, maybe 2, on my pieces, because my threat level is not so imminent that it is going to be like, if I don't kill this thing, we all lose the game on the spot. It's going to be like, if I don't kill this thing, I'm going to take 5 more damage from it, right? And so the positioning of that, and this is how I see a lot of mid-range decks, is that we are slipping in to that sort of curve whereby we can generate a lot of advantage. We can play a slightly slower game plan. We can come prepared for interaction and to interact. And we're not going to receive so much early interaction. We're essentially like, by deck design, buying ourselves away into the mid game.
Yeah, the only caveat to that, and I know you love it when I throw this at you, is I absolutely like turn 2 and 3 Malcolms and turn 2 TPIs. I love to bolt the shit out of them. Because there's like a tempo. It's
tempo.
And in fairness, it really depends on the pod composition.
Very much so, yeah.
So
or if you have a lot of removal in hand, that's another instance. If you have a hand where maybe you kept a hand that just has a lot of interaction in it, and you're confident, say you have 3 pieces, and you go like turn 2 Vendetta, your TPI, it's going to set me back till building momentum till turn 5.
Yep.
And that can be advantageous depending on the pod. I think
now the caveat to that is like Malcolm is a good thing to remove at any stage of the game.
Early and often is the way I would look at it. Mainly because Malcolm is like generating the resources it needs to be recast.
Right.
So it's going to make your removal useless, basically. It's going to mean that you kind of like discarded your card.
TPI is one of those things that if I have the opportunity to trip up, and this goes for any 2-mana commander that's going to start providing an engine into a bigger late game.
Sure.
This is the same advice. TPI just happens to be the poster boy for that right now. So and there can be other instances like this. Sometimes you will get the rare opportunity to accidentally kill the TPI through other things. Maybe it's like a Drown in Sorrow. What I would say, and this has been an interesting lesson to see play out the way I thought it would, right? Which is that you need to be very cognizant of whether you are ready to take full responsibility for the threats at the table if you dunk on the TPI player. Because if you were to look at my list, I have 11 counter spells and 14 removal spells. So that's 25. That's a quarter of my deck. 25% of the deck is dedicated to interacting with the table. And if you are ready, because your position is so good, to solo 2 players, and if we're assuming one of them is a combo, maybe 2 of them, then have at you, right? But you need to be really cognizant that if you take the TPI player out early, you may actually end up dying to something that they would be able to save you from, or save and
both
part of that
from, right?
And part of that is having an objective look at that. Part of that too is so if we took some of the spells that you play in your TPI list, and we took them outside of the TPI list, and we looked at those cards external to TPI and its mechanisms and all that stuff. Like
some of them will look really weird.
Some of them
they would look quite bad.
Yeah. So what you're saying is like the card selection that you've chosen is somewhat dependent on having those creatures in play and all of that.
Thank you for tying that together. That's a really good point. And we can use an actual real world example of this, right? Which was in the Common Cause tournament. I got to the finals, and there was a turn 2 Tithing Blade played, and it was that rare timing where an edict actually did clip TPI. It was turn 2, I ran out TPI, they played turn 2 Tithing Blade, they got him. The unfortunate thing about that was that like a lot of spells in TPI sort of require that TPI has done some things before you can cast them. Good examples, Galvanic Blast is not on until we've created 1/1s, right? It's only hitting for 2. Another one would be, it's a shock, right? And that may work, but it may not, right? Heartfire, Improvised Club, same thing, right? Massive Raid, right? Same thing. Shatter the Source, same thing. Outnumber, same thing. Right?
Shared Discovery.
Shared Discovery. Well, and of course, if you're turning off somebody like me from using a 1-mana draw 3, there could be some advantage to that, right? Because a 1-mana, Treasure Cruise,
right? But I was
are really good.
I was just leaning into the fact that a lot of these
turns things off.
It turns things off. So So looking at it from the perspective that I posited earlier about if you're just trying to create a stumbling block, hitting TPI early and then affecting that is, it's one of those things.
I would say, generally speaking, as a rule of thumb, it's not a good idea. And that's not coming from me just like wanting my TPI to go uninteracted with. I just know that like in the meta, I'm probably abnormal in the amount of interaction I run. I run a lot, right? Like my mid-range decks are running minimum 20 pieces of interaction. In like a black deck, it's going to be higher than that just because that's black does it so well. But like if you're not one of those people who is running like that much interaction like I am, you ought to be really, really concerned about taking the TPI player out of the game if there are imminent threats on the table. Because what happened in that game was that I was Tithing Bladed. I had to spend my next turn developing, right, to just try and get my TPI out again. It was dazed. Somebody dazed my TPI. And then the next turn, the combo player who had a very fast start went off and won. And we all died with me having 3 pieces of interaction in hand, all of which were not at the ready because I was essentially like taken out of the game. So if you're in a pod where there is no combo player, then I think you can really start to think about what does it mean to tempo a TPI player, right? Then I think that makes a lot of sense. Use your Final Flourish if you've got it, right? Or an Echoing. Well, Echoing Decay you want to save for the tokens, but if you have like some sort of Defile, turn 2 Defile, turn 2 Disfigure, that makes a lot of sense to me. Like if I was playing against TPI, no combo player, I'm definitely going to take that opportunity to just like set them back a couple of turns, right? I think that's perfectly fine. In a combo, in a setting where there's combo players, the TPI player is an asset to you in a way that hurts, right? Like I'm charging you a fee for my interaction, and that's your life. I'm taking away your life points, and in exchange, you're probably not going to die to combo. It's a bit of a devil's bargain, but like we have to think about that. Like, how do we position ourselves at the table? And TPI is saying like, I've got pingers in play. They hurt you every time I cast spells. I'm making 1/1s, which makes it harder to kill me. And yet I also don't have an untapper and 3 auras on my land. I also don't have 5 mana rocks and 12 tokens, sitting there ready to, go infinite with a single flicker and an Archaeomancer, right? So we are doing potent things, but we are not ending the game on the same time frame with the same intention as a combo player. And by doing so, we buy ourselves a bit of space and breathing room.
And part of that is probably for those of you who decide to pick up this deck, if you're not talking to your pod, and saying, hey, this is what I'm doing, blah, blah, you have to, it almost requires a high level of transparency of what you're trying to do.
Absolutely.
And then not reneging on, Like, oh, I'm suddenly a combo deck. You know, if you include those pieces in there, you have to kind of be honest about what your approach is there. So, all right, so let's take, Ryan and I had agreed, so also atypical to this experience. We're going to spend the next few minutes here rounding out this episode. It won't be the complete hour. Instead, I'm going to put a bow on this, and we're going to mention this video in the following live stream over on the Common Connoisseurs, where we're going to talk more broadly about tournament experiences. For once, I get to talk about my my own experiences, all that stuff. Word has it.
We can talk about the deck. We can take a look at the specific choices in there. Because there are some, and I think for those of you watching, the meta and the sort of general awareness of and the education level really within cPDH. So the experience is increasing. People are getting better, right, at playing with the cards that they have available. For some people, they may be just becoming better Magic players. I think that tends to be what happens when you restrict people's choices to like bread and butter cards.
Well, not everybody's getting better.
Clay,
so let's take before we wrap this up, let's take an opportunity. So TPI, your build of TPI was one thing a year ago. It is a completely different thing now.
Yes.
So have we reached until something drastic is printed in a Modern Horizon set or something like that? Have we reached kind of that 96th percentile of the expression of TPI? Or is this going to change?
Mid range? Yeah, I would say for TPI mid range, this list feels like above 95% for what I want to do for my goals and the sort of positioning at the table that I want to take, the kind of stance, the kind of interaction I want to levy. There's a lot of things that I've learned about this deck in playing it that are reflected in the choices of the cards. It's going to reflect itself in the kind of interaction I run, particularly with removal, which is very much informed by the meta and the speed of it, I would say, and the early turns in which I want to be able to interact with things. The protection suite, or the sort of cards to defend my own game plan, are pretty solidly set in stone. The thing that's changed the most over time between when I started this and now,
which was a year ago now.
Yeah, which was a year ago. Yeah, I've been playing the shit out of this deck. Is the density of 1 or 0 mana cards in general. There aren't a whole lot of decks where I'm going to recommend that same pathway. And I know there's going to be folks who are going to disagree with me on this, but focusing purely on efficiency is going to frequently leave you dead in the water to the diverse array of threats that there are in this format, whether they be combo, Voltron, or otherwise. TPI is unique. TPI, you want velocity, you want Lotus Petal, you want Gataxian Probe, you want Arkham's Astrolabe, you want Brainstorm. And if you've watched some of my live streams, for those of you who haven't, I can kind of sort of briefly elaborate on that. I tend to be rather low on cards like Brainstorm, for example, because Brainstorm, at its finest in Legacy, is propped up by fetch lands. We don't have those, and plus we're in a format where the number of shuffles we have in a deck generally don't maximize Brainstorm. We just don't have enough shuffles that we can include that are just free.
So I'll hit you with this one.
A land, right?
I'll hit you with this one. As the movement away from tap lands, e.g. Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic, so we're actually intentionally getting rid of the few shuffle effects that we have.
Makes Brainstorm worse. So, yeah, but TPI is unique, and actually I had a conversation right before the tournament with Bacon Master Alex in the Common Connoisseurs, one of the patrons. He, I said, I think that in the past I was really anti-Brainstorm because it was just it's just getting us one deeper. We're not shuffling away cards regularly. Getting stuck under a Brainstorm feels really bad. But the way to look at a card like this is that it's 1 mana, it's instant speed, it looks at 3 cards.
Yeah.
TPI has bangers in it. If you brainstorm into a shared discovery, it doesn't matter that you know what those 2 cards are and you can't shuffle them, right? So we're looking for velocity. Brainstorm fits that bill. But yeah, Arkham's Astrolabe being another one. Gitaxian Probe, I'm really low on that card in general, but in TPI, if you go turn 2, Third Path Iconoclast into Gitaxian Probe, into Lotus Petal, into Of One Mind, you are starting the game with so much on-board resource to start leveraging against the table that I think that it makes the cut. So
I only like Brainstorm anymore for one of 2 reasons. And the first and foremost, I like to sandbag it. So if I have it in,
it's not a turn 1 play.
Yeah,
it's not really a 1 mana play.
If I have it in hand and somebody combos unexpectedly, then it allows me to actually kind of like
dig on the spot.
Lean into my deck a little bit to see what interaction I can pull. Yeah. And then I've
had the same thing happen with me in a recent game. Dug deep for an answer, found it with Brainstorm, went on my way. I actually did shuffle sometimes in the tournament as well with Brainstorm. But yeah, but a card that sees 3 cards for 1 mana at instant speed is exceptionally premium in TPI. Because if you just go into a meeting of minds and then you just draw the other 2.
Yeah.
Great.
And the other minor reason now, so Hand Disruption goes on this weird ride of being super popular, then not popular, then super popular, then not popular.
In terms of popularity, it definitely does that. Yeah, for sure.
So, having it, that the aforementioned is the primary reason why I maintain it in especially my combo decks, is to be able to, find that interaction when needed. But also if people are attacking my hand, it allows me to tuck away those combo pieces so that way they don't get stripped. So
that's true. Yeah, and I think that with Hand Disruption, the pattern we've seen is that people are always excited about it. I think that that's just generally something you see people come into the format. The first thing they want to do is discard everybody's hands. What experience has taught people in this format is that if you are not a combo player, discarding everybody's cards can be extraordinarily disadvantageous to you and can actually throw the game to the combo player, because people tend to discard
combo decks. Yeah, combo decks top deck really well.
They do. They top, they have their pieces in play. They top deck a card. They get to go and they get to win. Especially something like Abdel. They could be 0 cards in hand, have an Abdel in play with some stuff tucked underneath it, and they just find Flicker of Fate, and it's just go time, right? And so now, of course, the spot where discard fits in really well is in a combo deck that uses discard as a counter spell, right? Where you're discarding, and it's incredibly high value. If you're a black Abdel deck and you're just emptying everybody's hands.
Flicker.
Savage. I countered a turn, what was it, maybe a turn 2 or it's probably turn 3 or turn 4 Hopeless Nightmare against my Abdel opponent, because I saw the writing on the wall. And dude, they flickered that Abdel 4 times. If we hadn't, we would have had no hand. It would have been no game at all. Absolutely easy to see who would have won that game. So mass discard often finds its home in a black-based combo deck that doesn't have access to counter spells, right? Or wants to flicker permanents, in which cards like Virus Beetle become very, very good. But the thing that we're probably on the verge of seeing, and I think this will be really interesting, is mass discard doesn't actually choose a card from your opponent's hand. They always discard their worst card. Why not just play Duress?
Right. I've thought about this. I've actually thought about this here recently, but
because I don't want to mess up everybody's hands, generally speaking. I just want to find the card in their hand that breaks their back. And a turn 2, him to Turok, right before they're about to go off, you just duress their hand. And people will say, but that's taking 1 card from 3 players. Well, you play Lightning Bolt, don't you?
But also
I'm taking 1 creature from 1 player for 1 card.
A turn 1 duress will likely take away the card they kept the hand for.
That's a really good point. That's a really, really good point. Yeah, why did they keep their hand? If they keep a 7-card hand and you're maybe next in player order and you're oh, I have a duress in hand, it's I wonder what they kept that for. Well, if it's a Gretchen player, a lot of times they just have like Freed from the Real
or an aura.
or an aura. Yeah, like go ahead and like take that wild growth, or take whatever it is, whatever you need to do. It's very flexible.
So this is
so
akin.
I think that's where I want to see people moving into.
Yeah,
targeted.
this is akin to that lightning bolt Malcolm TPI tempo play that I was talking about earlier. It's the
1 mana interaction.
It's the same thing. All right,
same thing.
All right, so we've reached the end of this. So if you're watching this, I'm going to put in, I'll have to go in after the fact and put in the live stream thing for Ryan's deal. I'm going to try to package this up together before we go live so we can reference back to this one. Number one, dude, congratulations, for like pulling it out. I know it's been a long time coming. So... the deck.
Thank you, dude.
The deck is rad.
It's exciting to see the deck do what I designed it to do.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like it's really humming on all cylinders. And I've made some like brave decisions with the deck. And some things that challenged a lot of my like earlier preconceptions. And you and I have talked a lot about
kill those
TPI.
Sacred cows.
Yeah, slaughter those sacred cows. You for those of you who've watched the Common Connoisseurs before, Derek and I talk about this all the time. Every deck demands a different approach. And so like I'm running 30 actual lands, 32 land sources. And if you know me, I tend to be very conservative about that kind of thing. I want to hit my land drops. But this deck does not want that. It's not what it's there for. I'm playing Moon Snare Prototype, right? Like there are cards in this deck that I would play very, very few other places. And it's cool to see that rewarded. It's cool to see that sort of that, being brave with the card choices rewarded. And there were some really good opponents during the tournament. I felt like I was lucky to play alongside them. And I was lucky to even win some of my games, like every tournament you go in.
You won what, 4 of them?
Yeah.
Some.
Yeah.
You lost
we
one.
didn't play the 4th one, so I played well. I think I didn't make a ton of mistakes that hurt me. We all make mistakes during our games, right? But every tournament you have to go in being skillful with your deck, to have chosen a good deck for the tournament. And then the third thing is to get lucky, right? That's every tournament that you go to, because Magic is a game
better
of numbers.
Lucky than good.
I would say so. And so, mix those 3 things together. I think that I played well. I chose a good deck for it. I chose a comfort pick. I had other picks in mind too, but it was a comfort pick. I was just like, it was late at night. I just need a deck, sign me up for it. And I was really proud of my win. It's a great deck. The only thing I have to do now, the next thing is that I need a new name for Third Path Iconoclast. I like Notorious TPI, but I've realized, especially with the printing of the 40K cards, that TPI is classic Adeptus Mechanicus, Warhammer 40K, Skitarii. And if you don't know those words, if it all sounds like mumbo jumbo, it's 40K stuff. But basically they're like religious fanatics obsessed with the machine and with data and with code. And so they make robots, but they also they modify people into robots as well. And this is just a perfect example of it. And the reason I mention this is because the token coming from Sanctuary, from Be Fine Bobby for the Sanctuary, is likely to reflect that. So I need a Warhammer 40K inspired nickname for Third Path Iconoclast.
Get
Let
to
me
it
know in the description below what you think the deck should be named.
All right,
That's
brother.
what we want.
All right, we're gonna close this one out, and then we'll see you guys. Well, we won't be directing you to because this weird timey-wimey, kind of thing. But
we'll put the link in the description once it comes up. Maybe we'll set a time here to do a stream, and we can talk about our experiences, talk about our matches. We can look over the deck. We can use that fancy new green screen technology that we've unlocked. And Clay, thank you so much for having me on. And I'm very excited about.
Thank you so much for winning, so I could have you on. Duh.
We'll try and do it again for you. Yeah, we'll try and make it a repeat.
I mean, leave a little room for me,
We didn't get matched up, luckily.
Yeah.
So
I don't think we got matched up in the last one either. We didn't get matched up in the last one either.
The less mono black decks I have to face being TPI, the better.
Right on. All right, folks. We'll see you on the flip. Thanks, Ryan, for swinging by. Appreciate you.
Thank you too, Clay. Thanks everybody for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for the algorithm. Woo! Send this guy some love.